So now as we are going through angular velocity ratio of a particular belt drive, again we go through that ratio is correlating with the diameter and radius of that particular pulley. And again we introduce belt thickness and also we introduce some slip that observed in between the pulley and belt. Now further part is to find out that length of that particular flat belt. Length of that particular flat belt. So that in this case we are generally two belt drives we are considered as a open belt drive and crosser belt drive. Open belt drive and crosser belt drive. So in this open belt drive, this arrangement is like this. Open belt drive, this arrangement is like this. Two shafts are parallel. This is one shaft, this is two shafts. On these two shafts, one pulley is attached. These two shafts on one pulley is attached like this. Having this diameter is different. This diameter is different. On this shaft, this pulley is attached. On this shaft, this pulley is attached. And these two pulleys are joined. Or these pulleys, around these two pulleys, one flat belt is provided. Such arrangement is called as a open belt drive. These are used to join two parallel shafts. So these open belt drives are used to join two parallel shafts. And in this case, or in this open belt drive, total length of this belt is nothing but length in contact with larger pulley, length in contact with smaller pulley, summation of this length in contact with larger pulley, length in contact with smaller pulley, and this length not in contact with either of the pulleys. So total length of this belt is nothing but the length which are in contact with this pulley, larger pulley, length in contact with this smaller pulley, and length which are not in contact with these two pulleys are this distance and this distance. So here if you consider, if you look at this diagram, around this larger pulley, this belt is touched at this location, and at this location, and around this smaller pulley, this belt is touched at this location and at this location. So around larger pulley, this belt is touched at this location, and smaller pulley it touched at this location and this location. So this total length is nothing but the length, this arc length from this point to this point, plus arc length from this point to this point, and some distance from this point to this point, and distance from this point to this point. This is total length of this belt drive. So this total length of the belt drive we can obtain like this. Now this distance from this point to this point we can obtain by considering this triangle. If you consider this triangle O2A01, this is a right angle triangle. And for this right angle triangle, this length A2O1 is same. Having that this length is equal to this length, starting from this point to this point. And again this length from this point to this point is equal to the another triangle. This is equal to the another triangle having that same distance. So this distance we calculate, this distance and this distance is same one. Which is calculated here, d square minus r2 minus r whole bracket square raised to 1/2. That's square root of this term. By using right angle triangle theorem. So O2A01, by considering O2A01 right angle triangle, we can find out this distance. Now this distance is nothing but a arc length. And this arc length we can find out by r into theta. This arc length we can find out as a r into theta. Radius into angle between angle occupied by this arc. Radius into angle occupied by this arc. So angle occupied by this arc is, in this case for this larger pulley, is nothing but 180 plus this alpha and this alpha. So angle occupied by this arc from this to this point is nothing but 180 angle plus this much of angle and this much of angle. So 180 pi plus 2 alpha, this alpha and this alpha, pi plus 2 alpha. And angle occupied on this arc, angle occupied by this arc on smaller pulley is nothing but 180 minus this alpha and this alpha. So pi minus 2 alpha, pi minus 2 alpha. This is angle occupied by this smaller pulley, and angle occupied by this larger pulley is pi plus 2 alpha. So this arc length, is nothing but a radius. Now radius for this pulley is r2. Radius for this pulley is r2. R2 into angle occupied by this arc is nothing but pi plus 2 alpha. So this arc length is nothing but r2 into pi plus 2 alpha. So this arc length is nothing but r2 pi plus 2 alpha. And arc length for this smaller pulley is nothing but radius is now here is r1. Arc length is nothing but r into theta. Theta is a occupied angle by that arc. Now here radius is a r1 and theta is nothing but pi minus 2 alpha. Angle occupied by this arc is nothing but 180 minus this alpha and this alpha. So 180 minus 2 alpha. So pi minus 2 alpha is the angle. So theta is pi minus 2 alpha and radius r is nothing but r1 in this case. So this is the length. This is the length. Now total length is the summation of all this. Total length is summation of all this length that we have observed here. So whatever discussed here, that is written here. Length in contact with larger pulley r2 into pi plus r1, pi plus 2 alpha. Length in contact with now this is simplified. This alpha is simplified here. This alpha is O2A by O2O1. O2A by O2O1. So this alpha, this angle and this angle is same. So alpha, sin alpha is equal to O2A divided by O2O1. O2A divided by O2O1. So this sin alpha we can write as a O2A by O2O1. O2A nothing but R2 minus R1. O2A nothing but this is total R2 and this is R1. This is R1. So R2 minus R1 is nothing but O2A. R2 minus R1 divided by O2O1 is nothing but D. O2O1 nothing but D. D is the central distance. D is the central distance between these two pulleys. D is the central distance between these two pulleys. So this distance O2O1 is nothing but a D is denoted here T by D. So sin alpha is equal to R2 minus R1 divided by D. So this alpha is we can calculate as a sin inverse of R2 minus R1 by D. So this length in contact with larger pulley is simplified R2 pi. Now this alpha, we put this alpha value as a sin inverse of R2 minus R1 by D. Similarly for the smaller pulley, only this angle is changed. Angle is pi minus 2 alpha. Radius is changed as r1. Similarly, pi minus alpha is substituted here. This alpha value is substituted here, and this is changing like this. Now, further simplification. Now triangle, consider this. Again, as we discussed here, that length we calculated by considering this right angle triangle O2A01. Similarly, this is right here O2A01, or here they write as O1 O2. So this we can calculate by right angle triangle principle, and this is simplified. This length is simplified as a O1A is equal to d square minus R2 minus R1 square raised to 1 half, raised to 1 half. So this term is simplified. Now this d square minus R2 minus R1 square and square root or raised to 1 half. This term is simplified. This term is simplified by expanding this term. By expanding this term. Now total length is a summation of all these. So this term plus this term plus these two terms. This term R1 pi minus 2 sin inverse R2 minus R1 d and R2 pi plus 2 sin inverse R2 minus R1 d. These two terms are simplified. Now in this, if you add these two terms, this term and this term, you can take common this pi. You can take common this pi value. This pi value you can take common, and also this sin inverse term also you can take common. Sin inverse term here and sin inverse term here you can take common. Pi also you can take common, and that is simplified like this. So pi term take common, so this become R1 plus R2. This become R1 plus R2, and sin inverse term take common, and it becomes R2 minus R1. So this minus R2 minus R1. So this now becomes as R2 minus R1 sin inverse of R2 minus R1 divided by T. So this and this term as it is. Now we can simplify this term. We can simplify this term by expanding this term. By expanding this term, we can simplify this, and after simplification we will get the length of that particular belt. So just to simplification of this term, we will get final answer length of that particular belt. So this expansion, we will consider doing expansion of this term, d square minus R2 minus R1 square raised to 1 half. Now in this case, we consider d square common. Or we can divide by d square. This term becomes now, after dividing d square, this becomes as a 1, and this becomes R2 minus R1 divided by d bracket square and raised to 1 half. Now expanding this. After expanding this, we will get d into 1. Now this bracket, 1 minus something here, 1 minus something x, suppose 1 minus x square raised to 1 half. 1 minus x square raised to 1 half. This expansion of this bracket is nothing but 1 minus 1 half of this x square, 1 half of this x square. So x square remain as it is. Instead of this bracket, total bracket, these are split as a upper bracket and lower, R2 minus R1 square d square. So it is x square 1 minus 1 half x square plus remaining term. Now this further terms are negligible. That's why they are not considered here. Only two terms are considered here. So after expansion of this bracket, only two terms are considered. These further terms are neglected, and this bracket expansion we can write as a 1 minus R2 minus R1 square divided by 2d square. Now we put this into this, or say this is simplification of this term. Now put this value into this. So when we put this value here, it will become as a 2d, 2 as it is, and this term now becomes as a d into 1 minus this term, plus pi R2 plus R1 plus 2. Now alpha is very small. This term becomes as R2 minus R1 by d. This R2 minus R1 gets square and d, square and d. So this is nothing but the length of that particular bracket. So this is the expression for length of the bracket. This is the expression for the length of the bracket. Here this D is not in this bracket. Here by mistake this D comes under this bracket, but this D is not in the bracket. This D is not in this bracket. So D only R2 minus R1 square. Only R2 minus R1 square is exact one. This D is not inside this bracket. D is outside of this bracket. So there is no D square. There is no D square. Only R2 minus R1 square divided by D. So here length is equal to 2D plus pi R2 plus R1 plus 2 into bracket R2 minus R1 bracket square divided by D. This D is not inside this bracket. By typing mistake, this D come inside this bracket, but this D outside of this bracket. So 2 by D into R2 minus R1 bracket square. 2 by D into R2 minus R1 bracket square. D is not inside this bracket. By typing mistake, it comes under this bracket. So this is nothing but the length of that particular flat belt for open belt drive type. For open belt drive type, and this length is a summation of radius. Summation of radius. This length we can express in summation of radius and also difference in between the radius. Summation of radius and also in between difference of that radius. So in open belt drive we will observe that length is in terms of summation of radius and in terms of difference of radius, and that are also generally represented in terms of diameter. And that we can represent as R2 is nothing but D2 by 2, R1 D1 by 2, this R2 D2 by 2, this R1 is in D1 by 2, and that will becomes now as a 2D plus pi into D2 plus D1 plus D2 square minus here also bracket, here also that forget that bracket, here also bracket is there, D2 minus D1 square, D2 minus D2 total D2 minus D1 bracket square divided by 40. So this is the length of that flat belt. This is the length of that flat belt. This is the length of that flat belt. And again we can move further for the length of the cross belt. We can move further for the length of that cross belt. In this open belt, direction of both the wheels are same. In this open belt, you will observe the direction of both the wheels are same. These are arranged for parallel shafts. And we will obtain this length by summation of these three dates. These arc length, summation of this arc length, and summation of this non-contacting belt part. And we will obtain this direction. Now we will obtain the length of that particular belt. Now here also, for cross belt, now here for cross belt, direction of both this pulley, direction of both the pulleys are different. If it is rotated in this direction, this will rotate it in this direction, opposite direction. Both pulleys are rotated in the opposite direction. So such type of arrangement is called as a crossed belt. So we go through this derivation. Now this derivation is also similar. This derivation is very similar to this previous one. Only change is that these two shafts are now connected by this cross belt arrangement. So one wheel is rotated in, if suppose a clockwise direction, this wheel is rotated in anti-clockwise direction. So by considering this, now this angle is changing. Angle of contact of this belt is changing in both cases, in this both side. And then you can derive equation similarly for this cross belt drive.